everybody. Welcome to another episode of What a Hell of a Way to Die. It's Francis and it's Nate. Late October, Nate. The world is slowly going dark, at least on the top half of the world. And you got to experience some beautiful British weather today of soaking downpours. So
yeah, I managed to avoid it in the sense that we were starting a little late because I opted to wait it out because it was just this intense like rain squall, and now it's really nice out. It's weird, but I will say, yeah, the weather is, I think, maybe on the unseasonably warm side right now. Like it's not hot or anything, but just for this time of year, it's relatively warm, but it's kind of nice. And I will say that after it rains, taking a ride when it's not so wet that there's like huge fucking lakes everywhere. Something that I really appreciate is just how nice and clear the air is and how clean it looks and stuff. It genuinely feels like you've just increased the saturation sliders on life. Like it's very, very pretty. And so, you know, I had a very nice little ride coming in today. It's very, very Mr. Impossibly Autumn. Like, yeah, I'm enjoying it. You know, it's a good day.
Got your scarf and your fuzzy Ugg boots going.
No, I have a T-shirt with a spray bottle on it that says turf repellent 100% effective. And I've got a bike helmet that's scuffed up to fuck with that, Bobby Hill pointing a gun saying that's my surplus value, I don't know you on it. So no, I'm definitely like
glad you're staying on brand.
Yeah, I don't really do stickers. I don't really do stuff that could identify me to any other person. I definitely err on the side of not being twee or fucking standing out in the crowd. Call it the Indiana instinct kicking in. But I like that sticker a lot, and I was like, fuck it. We had an extra one. I was like, fuck it, I'll put it on my helmet. So I did.
Well, I'm glad. One thing that I'm kind of jealous about with British rain is, in the Midwest, especially in like St. Louis and anywhere along a river basin, like it rains and then the sun comes out and then it just makes it even worse because it's very humid. And it sounds like England is just like it rains and then it just kind of soaks into the ground.
Oh, no, it's damp and humid here. Don't get me wrong. It's just that it's never really hot enough. Like my experience here is that it feels as though when it does get to like Midwest summer heat here, the humidity drops quite a bit. So while it is uncomfortable when it's in the mid 90s here, it's like 40 or 50% humidity. You don't get like 90 days. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like that just, I've never, I suppose it can happen. It might have happened in the past, but like the humidity gets really high at night. But at night when there's a heat wave here, it feels like it's in the 50s and 60s at night. Like there have been some times when recently, like this past year, it didn't get below like the low 70s at night, which is, typical. That's more like southern or, Midwest heat. But that's pretty uncommon. Normally, like it does cool off at night. And then in the daytime, it's not that humid. So it's just a different kind of heat. But this country's damp as hell, dude. Like you get mold in the bathrooms if you don't leave the windows open. Like it's you gotta be mold strikes much quicker here in my experience than it has anywhere I've lived in America, aside from like having spent time in Hawaii, which obviously like is in the tropics. But like also in Hawaii, you don't typically leave your bathroom windows closed while you're showering. So like slightly different climate. Yeah, man, but it's it is damp here, but I mean, I think you just get used to it. Like it's not, you don't feel the humidity as much as you feel it in really anywhere in America, because like my friends from Northern California, when they visit New York, are always complaining about the humidity, and I'm just sort of like, what humidity? What are you talking about? Like it's not that bad.
Yeah,
but to them,
Midwesterners, look, Californians just don't understand like regular weather. Anytime I'm in California, it's like 95 degrees. Like you can see people. Well, let me say, every time I'm in LA and it's 95 degrees, you see LA people like literally melting into the sidewalk. Which, like, I get it. It sucks. Me being from Missouri, where it's just like, it's constantly, it's June or July. That means it's hot and wet constantly. Like you just imagine if you took like an electric blanket and turned it up to high and then like for some reason also dipped it in a bunch of water and then wrapped it around your head. That's the Midwest in the summer. So, I
mean, genuinely, I read somewhere that before the invention of air conditioning in places like the Deep South, there were like very, very low numbers of births. Basically, the best way I could describe it is like people just simply weren't fucking as often in like the hottest months of the year, which, I mean, when you think about overcoming the human condition, that's incredible. I didn't realize such a thing was possible, but apparently, apparently it's, there were literally demographic changes when air conditioning became available in the South, because then you could fuck normally even when it was really hot and humid.
Climate's a weird thing. I've been reading a lot about the beaver wars in America, which is before America was America, like French and Dutch and English trappers and the Iroquois and the Hurons and whatnot. This is like the 1600s, and the way that they hunted beaver originally was you had to go out onto like the frozen Missouri River and cut a hole in the ice. Like, I've never seen the Missouri River frozen solid ever in my life, but like back then it was just like, yeah, the rivers just froze. Like, there you could walk across them with no problem. Like these massive rivers that I live next to. So it's a very, the changing demographics, but also, changing climate of just humanity showed up and started cutting down trees, and all of a sudden everything got real warm. So, as we do.
It's not just like fanciful imagination when people, look back on stuff portraying London in the snow, like snowed in, having to shovel snow kind of things. Like in the 18th and 19th century, that was way more common. Since I've lived here, I can count 3 times that the snow has stuck longer than like an hour or so. And in one of those instances, it literally was just like on cars that are white, like where it didn't melt. Like it genuinely does not snow. I mean, there have been in 2010, I think there was a really harsh winter here, and the entire UK got massively snowed in, but that's relatively uncommon. Like, it's where I live, it's relatively uncommon for it to get below freezing, like even the lows at night. And if it does get below freezing, it's like 1 or 2 degrees below freezing. Yeah. So like, but it used to be much more common in this country, from what I understand, for like the sort of, happy Flemish painter winter scene sort of things of people frolicking in the snow. That was more common in the wintertime. And that does not, I mean, up north it does still happen, but like and obviously in like the Highlands and stuff like that, or in Wales where there's mountains. But like even down here, it was pretty common, and it's not anymore. And similarly, Indiana used to be way more common to have white Christmases, and we just don't really anymore. Like, it can happen, but it's rarer.
Yeah, we're really in St. Louis. We don't see snow until January usually, because like by that time it's been cold enough, like that snow sticks around. But yeah, if you get like those late November, early December ones, but then again, also we'll get like snowfalls in May sometimes. Like, I remember one time we had to cancel a drill weekend because it just dumped 6.5 inches in like the end of April, early May. And then it was gone in like 3 days. Just it warmed back up to 70 degrees, as the Midwest does. So we're in that really awkward position now where it's like 40 degrees in the morning and then like 75 in the afternoon. So you have to change clothes constantly, especially if you're always walking a dog during the day. So it's just that irritating time of weather where it's really beautiful and it's really nice, and it's hoodie weather, which is cool. But as somebody who has to walk a dog every morning at like 6:30 a.m., fuck all that. It gets very irritating.
There's like 9 dads in the greater Midwest who work from home, but also have Great Pyrenees that are currently experiencing this weather. And they're like, yeah, Francis, I know exactly what you're talking about.
There's a guy, John, who's kind of like the neighborhood handyman. I don't really know what he does, but I know that he's constantly like fixing stuff up and taking care of stuff. But he's like one of those guys that's just like every morning he's out, walking. He walks like a mile, and I see him out all the time. Like, I'm out there because I don't want to clean up dog shit on my floor. He's out there just living life, just getting some exercise in. So I imagine that after Stella is gone, if we don't get another dog, I will probably continue to do the same thing. I'm just going to be that irritating, like, middle-aged guy that just wanders the neighborhood at 6:30 in the morning. That's going to be fun.
Well, by comparison, something that I think you might get a little bit of a laugh at is in 2019, there's one of the more better known British rappers, Kano, released an album called Hoodies All Summer. And it was my first full year in the UK, and I didn't really quite understand, but now I get it, that like you genuinely can wear a hoodie all summer in this country. Like, there are maybe a couple of days when you might be uncomfortable, but it's also very funny to me because when I'll be out running in the summer, like when it's hot, like what feels hot to me, and I'll see like rude teens in just head to toe, either skin tight denim or just like tracksuits, not even breaking a sweat. I'm just like, you little motherfuckers. Just aging is cruel, man. I look like I said, I look like the chupacabra on a diet when I'm out running. It's insane.
Well, My wife and I had a conversation about, we're millennials are getting close to the over the hill ages, but we're not. I don't think we're going to have over the hill parties because 40 is not old anymore. We're not like all beat down and decrepit like our parents were. Probably because of us. Also, probably because if you remember over the hill parties at the age of 40 and 50, they always included a lot of wine and cigarettes. So there's probably a reason why our parents looked a lot older at the age of 40 than we did. I look at pictures of my dad when he was holding me as a baby in his 40s. It's like, I don't look like that, right? I don't. And no fault to the man. He was born in 1941. What the fuck was he supposed to do? But
I posted a photo on my Instagram of me and my dad. I was probably about 6 or 7 in this picture. I'm sort of leaning on him. He's sitting in a chair reading a book. And he was an Army officer and he was in extremely good shape for his age. But he definitely, to me, I just look at that because I'm about the same age now. I think maybe a little younger than he was in that photo. And to me, maybe it's just the perspective of not wanting to realize that you're older than your parents were at a certain point in your life you can remember. But when I look at that picture, I'm just he just feels older. He just seems older. Now, granted, he had much more receded hairline than I have, but still, it just feels older, put it that way.
Yeah.
But I take your point, though. There was something I saw recently on Twitter where someone shared this, that people who were born after 1990 just don't really have any memory of the fact that literally every public space you'd go into was just clouded in cigarette smoke.
Oh God!
And I can remember this. I remember going in this country, visiting when we had a layover in Norfolk, trying to fly space available, and we wound up going to dinner in a pub, and it was a wall of fucking cigarette smoke. I just very clearly remember going in because it was more than stuff I'd experienced in Germany, which is funny because the Germans love cigarettes, but
German smoking area in the airport that I was in, I think in Frankfurt when I was flying home from Afghanistan, was there's a table with a cheap ashtray on it. You can go smoke over there. Just don't smoke in this spot. Go just smoke over there.
Yeah. Well, my experience was basically in Germany that I just wasn't really going to places that much as a kid where it would be, late night, people drinking beer and smoking. And if I was, it was at a festival or something intense, and it just wasn't the same experience as going to a, British pub in the middle of nowhere. And this would have been 1992. And yeah, it was like I said, it was like the CS gas chamber.
Yeah, the mall that I used to go to as a kid, Northwest Plaza, I remember distinctly ashtrays in the middle in between the hallways or whatever, the mall walking area, just ashtrays every 50 or 60 feet because yeah, you could just chain smoke inside of those places.
Folks told me, I know we got to get on the actual topic of this episode, but folks told me that at Indiana University, it used to be very common in the lecture halls that there were just ashtrays in the corridors, and also like in the corridors of the lecture halls, the aisles. And also in some cases they had ashtrays every third seat or something like that. So you could literally be going to class as a fucking college student, not as faculty, not as, grad student, you as 18-year-old schmuck college student and economics 100 or something like that, and you could just be just blasting cigs the whole time. Well, part of me is that rules. The other part of me is God, that must have gotten so annoying.
As somebody who smoked back then, that sounds amazing, but as somebody who does not smoke now, I would want to strangle everybody.
Absolutely. No, and the ex-smoker's curse is that it annoys you way more than it did when you were a smoker or before you started smoking. But do you know what also annoys me the older that I get out? The thing that I think annoys me more than when I was in the military or before I joined the military is military hagiographies that completely miss the point. And we've had an opportunity to experience one of these recently because Colin Powell recently died. Colin Powell was 84 years old. He was in treatment for cancer. He was immunosuppressed because of this, and he died from COVID complications. Now, to set the thing straight, some people try to turn this into a vaccines don't work thing because he was double vaccinated, and it's just sort of vaccines don't grant immortality.
Right.
He's the kind of person who would absolutely be at risk regardless, was being treated for something that was attacking his immune system. He had, an inability to fight off stuff. Even with the vaccine, he was highly at risk. Mortality rates for people in his age bracket are huge, even if they're vaccinated. And especially before vaccines were available. And so he couldn't fight it off. So let's dispense with that part first because it's really stupid. Just shut up, don't talk, don't want to hear it. It has nothing to do with that. However, Colin Powell was the first black chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff. He was a ROTC or ROTC scholarship recipient who commissioned, I believe, in like 1959 or 1960 from, if I'm not mistaken, it was like City College in the CUNY system, or I know he was a CUNY graduate, so the City University of New York. I believe he was from the Bronx. And he, without trying to overemphasize this for effect, did contribute to what you might call, as I believe, a young major or a captain, a whitewashing of both My Lai and the conditions that led to My Lai.
Well, I before the show, I read into this. While there's never been anything that's specifically been tied to him, he was part of like the division that was covering that up, and he was part of investigator.
Yeah, and I mean, like what he
stuff,
did was basically like the sort of 15-6, like mistakes were made, but morale is high and things are going great kind of thing. Like I don't think he wasn't. It's not correct to equate Colin Powell with William Calley. But it's also not correct to equate him to somebody like Hugh Thompson, who, if you're not familiar with the name, was a chief warrant officer, was a helicopter pilot who basically landed his helicopter at My Lai and held Lieutenant Calley at gunpoint and threatened to kill him unless he made his soldiers stop killing civilians. And for his troubles, he was chased out of the military and had received constant death threats even after he left the military. And of course, the military being the military, in the long term, he eventually was brought in to lecture West Point cadets on leadership and stuff once, he was no longer, a traitor to the cause, which is what he was treated like for having stopped a massacre that was ongoing, if that makes any sense. So
sure,
Powell was in the AmeriCal division. Powell did in fact investigate, and if you go back and you read the stuff that Powell wrote, it's very much sort of Army pablum, and I think you could very much make the argument that as a senior leader, like he was either negligent on purpose or negligent by accident, and either way, he contributed to basically putting a positive spin on what was happening at the time, and that, like, you've got to take that into consideration. He then was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff during the Gulf War. He made some comments, obviously, that in retrospect seem very, very damning about American airstrikes on, for example, like baby formula factories in Iraq. And then he, as the Secretary of State, basically was brought forth to be the sacrificial animal, if you will, to sell the war in Iraq to the UN. Everything that he said turned out to be untrue. He was basically thrown out there to be a bullet absorber by his party and by Bush's administration, to be like, look at this guy who's respectable, that everyone has confidence in, that even Democrats think is a good guy who's respectable, who's not a party man. He just tells it like it is because he's as an admirable servant of the public. That's the guy they made go out and sell the illegal complete bullshit war. So yeah, Powell could have said no. I don't necessarily know if Powell had turned around and said this is absolute garbage, if they wouldn't have just done to him what they did to Shinseki. I'm not sure. But what I can say is Powell went along with it, and he later expressed regret for it. But I mean, like,
he didn't even really express that much regret. It was just like, yeah, I kind of misled, and he called it a black spot or a dark mark on his history. But like he also had history in Iraq 1.0 back in during Desert Storm and Desert Shield. Like, he was a part of those operations as well. So I feel like it's one of those, like, it wasn't hard to convince him because he probably already hated Iraqis. He's been in the military and doing all this work during the Iran-Iraq war. So I guarantee you he had a hand in that in some way or another. He was a leader during Desert Storm, Desert Shield, and then he came up with a vial of supposed anthrax, shaking it in front of everybody and talking about all these weapons of mass destruction, which were never found. Like, it was never like they were found in here's some rusty barrels that nobody could ever do anything with other than try to move them and die. There was no actual munitions, and then you get. But we've got this whitewashing going on of him because of, I don't know what he did that people find so admirable, other than be there. Like, everything.
I think that Powell had this reputation of having of being harsh but fair and being just like a reliable person. And I think that he was pretty good at kind of like getting people, like getting journalists on his side in the sense of, he had a lot of these relatable anecdotes. He was this trailblazer in the sense of, being one of the first black officers. I mean, the first black officer to get to that senior of a position in the U.S. Department of Defense. I mean, like, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is the senior most military officer in the military. Like the Secretary of Defense is not a military officer; it's a civilian. I mean, it can be. As I understand it, you'd have to resign your commission to be the Secretary of Defense if you were in the military. So, like the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, that's it. That's the pinnacle. And Powell was the first black American to reach that point. So, yeah, he had this storied life. He was, and I'm not really qualified to talk about this about other figures like him, but he was definitely like a person who was pointed to as this example of sort of like, a role model, if you will, for black Americans. And so to me, there's something very dark about the fact that Powell had this reputation of being a role model, of being sort of like this unimpeachable moral figure. And I'm saying this, as it's portrayed in America. Like, we can absolutely point out that what he did, and as a younger officer, and what he did, like you said, during the Gulf War, and just what the military itself did in that period he was in. I'm not saying this makes Powell this moral figure, but I'm saying that in the way that America portrays things, he absolutely was. Like, he was shown as that. He was broadcast as that. And the fact that they then threw him in front of the fucking bus like that, I mean, it's really great. Because here's the thing, right? Powell was always touted as like, he's going to be the first black president. The Republicans are going to run him, and he's going to be the first black president. Like, I'm telling you, man, I remember that stuff in the media. Now, whether or not that's realistic, I don't know, because, I mean, the 2000 election showed that the Republicans were, more than willing, even within their own primary, to just go full-on fucking Jim Crow racism if it got, the sort of, the Nixon acolytes back in power. And I think that it's grim, but, I mean, Powell went along with it. Like, he had doubts about it, even at the time, and he went along with it, and he failed. He failed an important moral test, like the most important moral test of his lifetime. He failed, and we will live in the consequences of that decision for the rest of our fucking lives, and so will our kids and our grandkids, when you think about the ramifications of what the Iraq War caused.
Yeah. And I mean, our kids and grandkids, also think about the kids and grandkids of Iraq who will deal with it even worse.
I saw some figures that something like 1 in 5 Iraqis has someone in their family who died because of the war. Like, whether because of combat, or because of sectarian violence, or because of natural disasters, or, just all this stuff. Like, something like 1 million Iraqis had to flee the country. Like, when you look at that stuff, like that, all of the totality of that, and Powell knew in advance that it wasn't right, and he went along with it. So, like, there's so much hay being made, man.
At that time, he was 85 now, so he's in his early to mid 60s at the time. And looking down, like you said, he's probably being groomed for something, if not, the position that he was in, then maybe something else later on down the line. And like, if you're given, we know that in the American military, if you're given some kind of moral test, which is going to say, hey, are you really going to allow a bunch of people to massacre? Are you going to allow these soldiers to massacre somebody? Are you going to allow, these lies to go through? And I think every soldier, especially at the position that Colin Powell was at the time, knows it's like, you have two choices. You can do the moral thing and say no, and get completely buried and dragged through the mud and possibly, die penniless. Or you can say the lie, and when you die, everybody's going to say really nice things about you. The news media is going to say nice things about you. All these supposed progressive Democrats who are anti-war are going to say nice things about you. Like, everybody's going to have nice things to say about you. As long as you do the lie and you go forward with it, everything's going to be perfectly fine. And it's as soon as you try to show any kind of moral fortitude, like you said, the guy who put a gun to Callie's head and said, stop murdering people or I will shoot you.
Yeah,
and then ends up getting dragged through the mud. And,
I mean, he stayed in the
thankfully,
army, but he basically had to he had to hide for a while. Like he was persona non grata among many people in Vietnam. In the U.S. military in Vietnam, and subsequently like within the army culture. Like he later became, as often happens, elevated as this moral figure at the time for his actions, but at the time, what he did was deeply, deeply unpopular. I would say that he would be comparable to. Think about anyone in our audience who is in the military. Think about the just like knee-jerk, vehement psychosis about Chelsea Manning. Imagine that, but far worse.
And not to go too far on Colin Powell, because it's. I mean, fuck him, but I mean, also fuck everybody at those positions. He had a chance to do something, and he chose what was going to make him comfortable rather than what would make other people comfortable. And maybe he didn't. Maybe he was under the impression as like, oh, in and out, 20-minute invasion. We're just going to be in and out. It's not going to be this long time period thing. But like, even that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if like the plan you had went awry and it's not your fault because that's not how it was supposed to go. Like, as soon as you pull a gun instead of doing negotiations, you've already kind of lost. Like, there is no winning when you have to resort to violence. Even though violence, ends most discussions as permanently as they can be, it's usually a lot better to not bomb the shit out of another country that's full of civilians. I mean, I'm sorry, shock and awe could be considered a war crime. We were bombing civilian, areas. We were killing a lot of people for I don't know what. I'm not exactly sure what the point of that was, other than a vial of white powder being shaken around, and then suddenly I have to get a bunch of anthrax shots for some reason. So,
yeah, man. Yeah, I mean, I think the thing about it is that, like, I understand why people who believe in our systems and institutions want to elevate him as an example of, someone to emulate. I understand that thought process. I disagree with it vehemently. And the reason I disagree with it is that you don't have to dig very far to find stories of people who, took a much harder stand because they felt morally obligated to combat something they knew was wrong. And you see how they are treated. I don't think Powell did the right thing. And I think when you are, this is an argument that I've made that I used to make with friends, fellow captains when I was in the Army, which is that, like, a lot of times there are these appeals for, he's a good guy and, judge him on the merits of his entire career, not this one bad decision. But one of the things that my perhaps saltier friends and I used to say, what's up, guys, if you're still listening, is at a certain point, it doesn't fucking matter. Like, at a certain point, when you get to that level of authority, and we're talking in our time as like company commanders or like, captains in the Army, like staff captains, like at a certain point, God forbid you're the fucking chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff or the Secretary of Defense, that at a certain point, like, you don't get do-overs, you don't get takebacks. Like, if you fuck up, it's on you and you're done. There has to be a point at which we look at somebody and say, I'm going to judge them based on the decision they made. And it doesn't matter if they were a good person and they meant well. Like, they fucked up a thing and you don't get to not fuck that up and keep that job. You don't get to fuck that up and not have that be your legacy. And that's the thing that gets me, right? Like that's your legacy, man. Like, all the stuff that you might have inspired people to do, whatever, you know what? You had the moral test of your lifetime and you fucked it up. And it's like, yeah, apparently you were also like, you gave to charity and shit and like you cared about stuff and you felt bad. It doesn't really matter. And I mean, I know that we are in a weird position being ex-army guys who both fought in the fucking wars and saying that. But like, my God, dude, like, you can't look at somebody like Powell in the position he was in and then say, oh, well, it doesn't matter. Like, oh, don't be salty about that. Like, oh, let's not be mean. It's too soon. Like, come on, man.
Yeah, there's a difference between, like, if you meet somebody and they're 35 years old and you find out, like, when they're 19, maybe they're an alcoholic, maybe they got a DUI, maybe they, hit somebody that they shouldn't have hit. But at the age of 35, they've been sober for 10 years and they do other, at that point, it's like, yeah, look, and I fucked. And also being able to say, I fucked up. I fucked up and I apologize for it. And I know that I was in a bad space at those times. I never want to say that somebody can't, rehabilitate themselves, especially as somebody who was ex-military and who voted Republican at one point in time. Please, for the love of God, don't judge me on the dumbass that I was at the age of 20. However, I also did not cover up war crimes, never tried to, was never involved in any. I was not around any of those things, and I would have immediately reported them.
You know what's funny is I've never told this story on this podcast, or if I have, I don't remember, but I'll tell it really quickly, which is that a soldier of mine came to me one time when I was the headquarters company XO. He had been one of my squad designated marksmen when I was a platoon leader. And he came to me and he said, I heard a story while I was in the transit, holding area coming back from leave about some shit that's going on down in one of our other company's AOs. And you're the only person that I trust that if I told you this, that you would actually do something about it. And what he had heard was, and the guy who did this is dead now, so I'm not really worried about him. He can rest in piss. But I don't mean the soldier. I'll take that again. The guy he was describing, the activity he was describing, the person who was ultimately responsible for that is dead now, so I'm not really worried about any of this coming back. But what he said was that one of the soldiers in the holdover, like the chalk he was on, flying back from leave, was bragging about people, his platoon or his company, having taken a village of Afghan people out at gunpoint and made them walk in front of their vehicles as like a human mine clearance package.
Jesus.
And he said, I don't know what to do, but this is so fucked up and I know this is wrong. And so I immediately went and did, I talked to one of my NCOs that I worked with who had been in Iraq and stuff, and I was like, this sounds fucking insane. And this guy, and he and I aren't friends anymore. He's a cop now. He absolutely is not he's not like me in the sense of being, prone to moral outrage about combat zone stuff. He said to me, and I'll remember this for the rest of my life, he said, if that's true, then we should just pack this shit up and go the fuck home, because what are we even doing in this country? We're worse than the Taliban.
Yeah.
And the guy who's now a cop said that. So anyway, I reported it, and they did an investigation, but what they did was they weasel worded it. They sort of were like, well, yes, this did happen, but it was the Afghan police who did it. So ultimately, it wasn't our responsibility, because the Afghans, they have sovereignty. It's, but it's like, you guys watched them. You laughed at this. You knew this was wrong, and you let it happen. And that was when you could have stopped it. You could have fucking stopped it, and you didn't. And when you're basically saying, well, technically speaking, we weren't the ones doing it.
Right, we're just the ones watching it and letting it happen,
exactly.
And probably laughing while it happened.
And so to me, when I think about that shit, that was one of the moments where I was just watching how they fucking, hand waved that. That's one of the reasons why I decided to get out. And one of the points that I make about this too is that when I hear people talk about shit like, oh, well, for example, we talk about this a lot. Oh, Chelsea Manning should have just used proper channels. Dude, I was a fucking captain. Manning was a private first class. I was a fucking captain, and I used proper channels, and this is what happened. Nothing happens because like we've said numerous times on this show, if someone actually gets convicted of war crimes, please stop your Facebook uncle from fucking donating to their appeal fund or whatever. They are guilty. The Army doesn't charge anyone unless literally there's no way they can explain it away. They want desperately to never charge anyone. And it's just, I've seen it with my own eyes. And so when I look at this stuff and it's just people trying to be like, oh, it's a complex situation. Powell, he had a life of service to this country. You shouldn't judge him. It's like, no, man, I will judge him. I will judge him based on the position he was in and the moral test in front of him and what he did, which was fail it.
Yeah,
and
he was an adult. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
If it's a 19-year-old private who fucks up, I hit him with an NJP or Article 15, maybe we can salvage that soldier. But when you're a full adult and you're in charge of you're the chief in charge of all of the armed forces, and you go up and lie, nah, go fuck yourself. That's not cool, especially if you knew it was a lie and you did it anyway.
But that's the point that I would make is just that's the kind of thing that got hand waved where people are like, oh no war crimes here, guys. And that's what happens when you use proper channels. That to me, and Powell of all people must have known that when you send American soldiers into a situation, like an occupation, that's going to happen. He must have known that. He saw it with his own eyes as a young officer in Vietnam, and then he was the one selling the war, as his final act as a public servant. I don't have any sympathy at all. And I'm gonna be honest with you, man. It just the further I get from being in the military, the harder I find it to rationalize or accept any rationalizations of this kind of thing. At a certain point, like it's not that I'm saying like everything in life is a binary, but I'm like, I feel as though you cannot hand wave the consequences of this man's actions. And, it sucks. It sucks to have, your life's work invalidated, if this was the one thing you did wrong, and we can make plenty of arguments that it was not the case. But I mean, yeah, for all of the, sort of grandfatherly figure that he was sold as to the American public, like it's another case of like, well, you fuck one sheep and you're a sheep fucker for life. Like, what are you going to do about it, man?
Well, and it also falls into that category of like, how could they be racist? They're so nice to me. And it's like, yeah, I'm glad that like, I'm sure Colin Powell was a super nice guy to the people, to you and me and anybody else who would have been around him. But, Iraqis don't think he was a super nice guy. And
ultimately the feelings of Iraqis is way more important to me than to fucking what Americans who want to, not be boo-boo lipped about what our country actually is feel. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
It doesn't fucking matter. Like, stop crying. Like, get out of your feelings. No one cares. But we have a little more stuff to talk about because, Milo and I on our most recent bonus talked about, or the previous week, talked about the phenomenon of the U.S., or rather the British military, and the whole concept of send in the army.
Yeah, you got to send them the paras to pick up the bins.
Exactly. Well, we just found out that apparently they want to send the army in America too. So I'm eating crow. I'm eating my hat. I'm like Matthew Goodwin, the Brexit guy, the guy who said, if Brexit happens, I will eat my own book live on TV, and then literally had to go live on TV and eat pages of his book. Because a headline from the Washington Post, White House has weighed tapping National Guard to address mounting supply chain backlog. The idea appears unlikely to proceed, but underscores extent of administration brainstorming to resolve snags. So this sounds like it's just sort of a thing they've put out there to make people like, guys, we're working hard. We're thinking about sending the army in, and not actually sending the army in. But let's read a little. White House officials have explored in recent weeks whether the National Guard could be deployed to help address the nation's mounting supply chain backlog, 3 people with knowledge of the matter said. The idea appears unlikely to proceed as of now, the people said, but reflects the extent to which internal administration deliberations about America's overwhelmed supply chain have sparked outside-the-box proposals to leverage government resources to address the issue. The people involved in discussions stressed the White House has looked at the option as part of its due diligence in assessing all potential ways to address the backlog, which has slowed down imports and shipping all over the country. One person with knowledge of the matter said the White House has not considered activating the National Guard at a federal level, but could instead work through states to deploy service members. Okay, here's what I'm going to say. This, in the initial couple paragraphs, just reads like Biden hard at work puff piece in the Washington Post. It is not the same thing as the British psychosis of really wanting the army, also, and actually sending the army in to do stuff. It's just and you're correct. There are I have seen a few people who are just like, well, what if we send in the army, but like not in a serious way, because you can immediately say like, well, that's not what the National Guard does. They don't have the capabilities. If anything, you want the reserves, because the reserve has logistics. The reserve has transpo. It's got the reserve runs like transportation command like all over the reserve and active duty. So like if it's a logistical thing, the National Guard's not what you want. The National Guard are a bunch of bodies that you can get quickly together and say, go do this thing. Everybody go and pick up a box and put it on that truck, because we need 10,000 people to do that to get all these trucks out. That's what you get the National Guard for. They are, and this is not to denigrate anybody who has specialties in the National Guard, obviously healthcare, and there are logistics, and there are people who do various things in the National Guard, but the National Guard has the biggest difference between the National Guard and the Reserve is National Guard has combat arms and the Reserve does not. We have no combat arms outside of like MPs at the most. So we don't have infantry, ADA, tankers, anything like that in the Reserves. You do in the National Guard because they are they're supposed to be able to keep the states secure and everything, but really they're just there to be bodies that they can be called up on to be used for
emergency situations. They're not supposed to be long-term kind of things. So like this whole like, oh, we've got to do something about supply issues. Now, like, look, I live in St. Louis. I live as far away from an ocean as you can get. The biggest supply chain issue that I've seen is FedEx saying that some of the patches that I've ordered for the store are going to be delayed by 3 to 4 days. All of my, I got all the sugary cereal and treats that I need in my at Costco for me. So I don't know where any of this logistical stuff is coming from. I'm not too concerned about it at the moment. Because like all the things that people are yelling about, how we have trucker shortages and we've got this shortage and that shortage, we've always had that. Like that's always been a thing that's going on. So I don't know. You know what? In 2 months, maybe I'm eating my last can of beans and recording on my generator as we upload it, and then I'll die of starvation. Could be. But what this really comes down to is that this is not a thing that anybody's going to do, because there's absolutely no way that like your California National Guard is going to show up at the port of LA and know what the fuck to do at all. If they're going to have to do like at least 3 months of training before they can touch anything. So not really the the Flash. Oh, here it is. Here's the thing that we're going to do to fix everything. The National Guard's not that. No matter how much you want it to be, they're good at going and standing and looking bored on the border, I guess. But other than that, they're not going to be very effective in this capacity.
Yeah, well, I'll be honest with you. I would be interested in seeing if this actually happens, but I don't think it will. Even during the loadout for the Iraq War, the U.S. military used lots and lots of civilian stevedores because, well, for one, in some states they were obligated to, but in other cases, like that's just what America's logistics capacity is. So that's a little anecdote, but I just have a feeling like I can't imagine that the National Guard, the reserves, would be able to flex in a way that's going to augment what is entirely a civilian supply chain issue. If the issue is like longshoremen and, hauliers or fucking teamsters, great, but I don't want to fucking break strikes with the military. Like let's not go back to the 1920s, which is 100% what the military was doing. So
I got my orders to this place called Blair Mountain. Weird.
Oh, sick. Can't wait. Yeah. So long story short here, I would just say that if this happens, I'll be surprised. This to me reads, because in Britain they actually have done this. This reads to me more like like the administration putting out a good word that's getting reported on in a way that's going to get headlines. That maybe I'm being cynical, but like if 100% this is just evaluate options, and this is one of the the options that were evaluated, like, I can tell you from evaluate option stuff from MDMP for like, theater level exercises in Korea, that there's going to be some fucking crazy options out there that are technically feasible, but that we're just not going to do. So the fact that did exist on like the, national presidential level MDMP board or whatever the hell it is, does not surprise me. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be policy. And that's that on that.
Yeah, this whole article is just a puff piece by Jeff Stein to fill in some stuff on
Jeff Stein. We don't like you, Jeff Stein. You're carrying water for the damn Democrats.
Why I'm very curious as to what 575 people wanted to say on this article that says literally nothing.
That could be interesting. I do actually want to take a look at that, because oftentimes national or Washington Post commenters can be like extremely resistance brain. So I want to see if we can get, like, they probably won't be as good as military.com, our precious, absolute greatest repository of thought. But let's see.
There's one, the longshoremen won't have it. Send the National Guard in to help unload ships and the ports will shut down. I'm not sure why the longshoremen would give a shit.
Maryland Royal says, this is what happens when we don't make much stuff at home ourselves. Cherry Ghost replies to them, it's what happens when you have an imbecile president who had no functioning brain that chose to antagonize our trading partners rather than work with them.
Which one do you think he's talking about? I
would say Trump, because it's the Washington Post, but who knows?
My sewage is backed up. Can I call the National Guard myself? Good question.
Robert Grant 123 says, this is a bad idea. The National Guard does not exist to be a source of cheap labor for private firms. The supply problem is not a crisis. Yeah, good. Agreed. Denali Dad says, not a crisis? Clearly you've not tried to build or buy something recently. And then Common Sense Prevails replies to Denali Dad, and how is that a national crisis that warrants calling out the National Guard? Yoda the Opinionated says, I agree. Christmas gifts not getting to stores is not a national crisis.
You know what the answer is, Nate? The answer has been staring us in the face all this time. We need to go back to Maoism and start making pig iron in our backyards.
I agree. Page O says, really? If you haven't heard or noticed it in stores yourself, there are big shortages going on, and that's driving costs up. That's not great for the economy. I can't imagine that having these bottlenecks at the ports is helpful to national security either. But the biggest problem is the reaction some people will undoubtedly have, blaming politicians for something not under their control, further eroding confidence in our system of government. That opens the U.S. to further conspiracy theories and misinformation campaigns. When democracies fail, there's some crisis that pushes the anti-democratic into positions of power, and voila, dictatorships are born. So there it is, guys. We are going to have a dictatorship in America because we did not have enough treats.
Not enough treats. As soon as the sugar smacks fell, America fell.
It did.
I mean, really, it's there's also plenty of strikes going on all over the place. It's not necessarily just a slowdown in getting things to you because the raw materials don't exist. Don't eat Kellogg right now because fuck Kellogg.
Ultimately, what it comes down to is everywhere in the world is having problems with this, like because there's been huge supply chain shocks because of COVID. And also
millions of people died, guys. I don't know.
Millions of working age people died too. And particularly people who are exposed in positions and jobs that don't necessarily pay very well. So big shock. This is happening. So
yeah. And people are also realizing I don't have to get paid shit to work a dangerous job. I don't have to work these I know that there's a lot of labor shortages in shipping and manufacturing and things like that. That's why it's hard to get parts. But at the same time, the closest Starbucks is constantly closed early, and McDonald's is only doing drive-through. You can't go inside because there's only 3 people working. Those are the real supply chain slowdowns. It's a labor slowdown more than anything else. As soon as you pay people what they're worth, and they start showing back up to work, and to not get treated like a piece of shit, you're going to see these things probably go away. But we're not going to do any of that, or at least not quietly and not easily.
Southern states will literally reintroduce Jim Crow era fucking vagrancy laws where they go into your house and send you to prison to be on a chain gang if you don't have a job at all times before they would fucking allow people to do labor organization. I mean, I'm not trying to be blackpilled here. I'm just saying that there's form for this in American history. So just bear that in mind before you start being well, no. The past doesn't exist. It has no bearing on us. But I know, Francis, you got to run here shortly. So why don't we talk about our bonus this week?
Yeah. So the Zoo Crew, myself and Carrie Shocks and Joe Kasabian talked about Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Scheller, the Marine who decided to talk shit and then got hit with charges.
He posted himself into the literal brig. He posted himself to jail.
He posted so hard that they're we have to put you in prison to stop posting. And it worked. It was the only thing to get him to stop posting dumb shit. And then he went to the brig and a bunch of charges were brought up on him. And then one judge apparently said, nah, and let him go with a $5,000 fine. So that's going to be interesting to see what he does if he decides to go full on right wing or if he disappears into the shadows. We have a lot of speculation going on in the episode about that. So please enjoy. That's some shit that you leave for the private YouTube that has 40 followers and is only going to be viewed maybe 10 times. You fucked up putting this on LinkedIn. That's where all the professionals go.
It's such a weird choice of platform, honestly. That part still baffles me. That this
LinkedIn is it's a cursed place of it is. Every time I see LinkedIn kind of leak in, somebody will just post something from it. It's just the most bizarre shit because it's a place where everybody wants to shit post, but their names and jobs are literally tied to them, tied to each other. So it's they're all it's like watching remember when you would see Chris Hayes from MSNBC almost have a leftist position, and it's just you see that he kind of wants to do it, but he just can't. That's all of LinkedIn. It's a whole lot of edging, and I don't know why they do it to themselves. Go on Twitter.
There's a whole bunch of grind set lords.
Probably that too.
Or crypto. I don't know. A whole bunch of people I strongly dislike all on one website. It's Facebook with probably less members of my family on it.
I assume everybody there is trying to get money out of me in one way or another. And the only reason I would be there would be to, probably get money out of people. So that's why I'm not on there. None of my friends have money. So I want to read. I found Stuart Scheller's Facebook. So
Wait,
we're
it
gonna
still
go back.
exists?
Oh God, yeah. Oh,
Man, this
buddy,
guy's fucking stupid. You gotta nuke that shit as soon as you get hooked up.
I was going to say, you know who has terrible fucking counsel? This guy, apparently.
here's the text. He posts some screenshots of text. So the text that he sent is, "Hey, I need a JAG officer, not you, willing to swear an official statement / charge I plan on delivering tomorrow. Please advise on a time." The response is, "I'm sorry, I can't do that for a number of reasons. I further advise you to not pursue this idea of preferring charges against the senior commander, as it will only cause you prejudice and potential legal harm. Give me a call if you have any questions, or if intended of pursuing this any further." His caption on this is, from the senior USMC defense attorney on the East Coast. Imagine a Lance Corporal trying to press charges against a senior officer. What chance does he have? We can't all be wrong.
So this has to do with a little bit of info that after his first video, he put out another video which I believe was the one that he was playing a game of chess,
yes,
like some kind of fucking mind god, and
in a bus in the middle of the woods, like a perfectly normal person.
And
perfectly normal, not Unabomber kind of person.
That's where I like to play chess.
He claimed that he had read the entire UCMJ, which is great, and said that there was a provision in it that allowed anyone under your chain of command to charge you with a crime, which I need to be completely straight here, is not true. And he decided
a fucking barracks lawyer. What the fuck?
He decided to forward charges against, I believe, the head of the Marines, like the commandant.
The commandant, yeah,
either that or like the chief of staff. It was some general, and like everybody was like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah, it was like CENTCOM. It was some fucking shit, and he essentially decided that he was going to put the system on trial.
Yeah, he quite literally went full barracks lawyer / like, I don't know, almost like a layer of sovereign citizen here. But like, there's no provision in the Uniform Code of Military Justice to say like, I'm back in and I'm a specialist and I really fucking hate my squadron commander. And I'm like gonna, I don't know, file a charge under being a dipshit or whatever bullshit else he was making up. Like, you can't do that. Like, that's not how that works. And like, the thing is I fully believe that there was some other layer to this where like he didn't come up with this fucking idea. Somebody else did, because that first letter tells me that he was going to shut the fuck up and eat shit. But like, he probably got in contact. I'm going to go on a limb here and say former General Flynn or someone of that nature.
Well, he's been working with Eddie Gallagher's fucking band of war criminals.
Okay, so yeah, I'm going to 100% say General Flynn.
So like, 100%.
His brother is also in command of all of PATCOM now. I should point out where I live. He's in charge of all of this, which is great. But like, yeah, I want to say it was probably something like that. Maybe the strange Gallagher clique. I don't know if he's in with General Flynn or anything yet, but like, Flynn believes in all sorts of wild ass shit like this. Like, he's fully Q-pilled and believes in all sorts of very weird ideas of the law, which border on sovereign citizen shit. So I wouldn't doubt if we got some kind of weird sovereign citizen spin on the UCMJ somehow, which is just so many. It's so many layers down of stupidity that I have a hard time believing that he came up with this on his own, especially framing it with the chess board. It was all theater, but it was like, what's worse than community theater? I don't fucking know. It was
it was like high school drama club.
Yes,
like, yeah.
I mean, like, yes-anded himself into fascism.
Yeah, he yes-anded himself into the brig. He was thrown in jail after this.
And it's so like it's so incredible that like I watched that first video and I'm just like, okay, this guy, like, it's dumb, but I agree with what he's saying. And then he immediately like just hit the fucking pedal and went hard right. Like, I want to read these books, and one of them is literally like a fascist book by an American fascist. What's his name? Fuck.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. In general, this is not binding legal advice on any of you there in the audience right now, but like a little bit of legal knowledge can be like a dangerous fucking thing. Like, it absolutely, like, you can read the UCMJ, you can read other different things, but like,
there's a reason why that's not just like what law school is.
And there's a reason why every single time someone is like, oh, they're acting as their own lawyer in court, everybody's like, oh, this should be good.
Yeah. I mean, like I read about like some January 6th dude today where he, was in federal court and like over like the federal judge who like anytime an Article 3 judge like is, strongly warning you against something, a lot of these guys are reactionary assholes, but maybe lend an ear. Because you like warned him not to be his own counsel and he like fucking powered through and did it anyway. And then immediately like sat himself on the witness stand and admitted to like 2 further felonies. Like my guy like admitted to like, that he was going to try to reach out to the witness or to like the wife of like a state court judge in order to get him disqualified from a trial, which is like 100% obstruction of justice.
I'm gonna go I threatened somebody to do what I wanted. What's wrong with that?
And then like
I found a witness and I threatened him with a knife, but they're not here now, so you can't question them.
Yeah, like that's not how any of this works. And like similar, like I think he also like shock of shocks. Like he was what do you call it? Like threatening his like ex-wife or something and was involved in some family court proceeding.
Of course he was.
And like put down the same judge's wife's like cell phone number as his contact number. So like falsified a form and like, and just like all of the, like, which is also perjury. So like just in general, just because like and similar to fucking Schuler, he did all this after saying, nah, it's fine. I studied the law for 2 weeks. I know what I'm doing. And like, I am 100% the first fucking guy to admit that most of law is fake. Con law in particular is like real fucking fake. The Supreme Court is fake. Like, and not fake in a way that, because there's fringe on the flag. But, it's like most of the law is like meant to accrue to the benefit of the rich and powerful. But like, don't like read, the spark notes of like the, United States Code and then like go to fucking war with it.
He read the entire UCMJ. How could he be wrong?
Right.
That's
like,
right.
Yeah. There's a reason why like you don't just like read all of the laws and then go take the bar exam. Like that's not.
Is that not how it works?
And you can tell that
it should be how it works. God damn it! I should memorize all the laws.
You can tell that he immediately backpedaled because he makes this video and he gets thrown in jail almost instantly afterwards.
Yeah,
right?
because the Marine Corps kept telling him, like, stop posting, and he refused to do it. Like,
they literally had to throw him in jail to stop posting.
Log off, motherfucker would not log
this
off.
This guy had to be given a lawful order to log the fuck off. And he still said no. And then he got thrown in jail. And then after stewing in jail for a little bit, he's like, you know what? I'm going to get a lawyer because I am a fucking idiot. And like it's telling that it really does seem that this started as him grandstanding. Which, because it was, I mean, the first video, it could have been the most. This dude could be the field officer spitting truth as much as he wants. He's gonna get fucked up for that. He did it in uniform, named superior officers, and the president of the United States. Well, shit talk. Like this is a how-to on how to get fucked up by the UCMJ.
As always, you can follow me at Army Strang, follow Nate at In These Deserts, and follow the podcast at Hell of a Way. We've got the store. We've got lots of bonus content. We've got so much bonus content. And we're coming up on 5 years pretty soon. We got a month will be 5 years of this podcast.
That's true.
And November 6th is my 1 year anniversary of getting out of the Army. So we got some celebrations coming up in November.
Exactly.
Finally, November is not just Thanksgiving. It's also, and not just Veterans Day, but also Podcast Day.
It is. It is very much. And we appreciate you being listeners. We appreciate you being fans of your Patreon supporters. We really appreciate that because it lets us do this for a living. And thank you so much again. And we'll talk to you next week.
Take care.